start with the NFL. This year, we're finally getting that epic game of quarterback musical chairs that we were promised last year. Remember, 2021 was all that hype, but not much movement. 2022, on the other hand, is total chaos. Russell Wilson to Denver. Aaron Rodgers back to Green Bay. Tom Brady to retirement and back. Carson Wentz to Washington. Mitchell Trubisky to Pittsburgh. Deshaun Watson to court. And then to Cleveland. And yesterday, there were 3 more decisions. The Colts send a third-round pick to Atlanta for Matt Ryan, which means a couple of things. Let's start right there. The Colts are going to start a different Week 1 starting quarterback for like the billionth year in a row. And now there is an opening for a starter in the ATL. Except that was filled in about 60 minutes when the Falcons went with Marcus Mariota. And now that it's clear that the Saints are not going to get Deshaun Watson, they made their move yesterday and they re-signed Jameis Winston. So that's 2 former number 1 picks overall and a number 2 making decisions all within about an hour of one another. So if you can't tell, that game of musical chairs is getting close to a finish. So now what are we left with? Like a chair and a half and at least 2 guys, Baker Mayfield and Jimmy Garoppolo, and they're still playing. Both those guys want new teams, but there aren't too many teams that want them. Indy didn't. Neither did Atlanta. So what are we down to? Carolina and possibly Seattle. The Panthers are desperate for a quarterback, but how badly do they want Baker or Jimmy? And if they've got Sam Darnold and they don't want Baker or Jimmy, what's that say about Baker or Jimmy? Seattle has got Drew Lock. So it seems hard to imagine that Frisco would trade Jimmy to a division rival, right? So do they really want Baker? Do they feel like Baker is a big enough upgrade over Lock? And again, what's that say about Baker if he's not considered an upgrade over Darnold or Lock? And what about Jimmy? Does he end up just staying with the 49ers? After all, the guy did take them to an NFC Championship game with a busted shoulder. His teammates do love him. Or do the Giants or Eagles want to jump back in? I guess what I'm getting at is this. The Colts were not interested in Mayfield or Garoppolo. They saw Matt Ryan as an upgrade over both of them. And you know what? They're right about that. They are right about that. And it is going to be a little bit weird seeing Matt Ryan rocking the shoe. Then again, watching the Colts the last few years has been all about getting used to seeing different guys rocking the shoe. They're going to have a different Week 1 starter for the 6th straight year. I mean, that is insane. I mean, you have to do what you have to do. And I've always said that it's a quarterback league. Either you have one or you don't. Either you have one or you better get one if you don't. No team proves that more than the Colts. They're always looking for one. They know what I'm saying. Trust me, they're trying their asses off to get a starter that they can count on. Like, they really believe they're one starting quarterback away from a Super Bowl. Now, to me, that's obviously not the case. Unless Pinky in his prime is walking through that door, or an Andrew Luck in his prime is walking through that door. The problem is neither of those things are happening. Pinky is like 60, and Luck got sick of getting his kidney smashed. But since then, check the revolving door. Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, now Matt Ryan. Some guys they knew were not going to last forever. Some guys hoped that would last forever. And one guy, Carson Wentz, they got sick of before he even played a single game for him. What I'm saying is this. Do not think for a second that Matt Ryan is not an upgrade over Carson Wentz. He is. He is. I know it's been pretty fashionable to bash Ryan for a while, and I know he's older, but here's the thing about Matt Ryan compared to Carson Wentz. Matt Ryan isn't Carson Wentz. There is your upgrade. Just by not being the other guy makes it an automatic upgrade. You're not going to be reading anything like this from The Athletic after Wentz gets dealt, or was dealt. Quote, As for the Colts, the issues with Wentz stretch back to before the season began, one source said, and over the course of the year, some grew frustrated at what they deemed a lack of leadership, a resistance to hard coaching, and a reckless style of play, which had a role in several close losses this year. End of quote. You're never going to hear that about Matt Ryan. Like, I don't care how old this guy is. I don't care how many times he got sacked last year. He's not going to show up with a, quote, lack of leadership, a resistance to hard coaching, and a reckless play. You're not going to have to worry about this guy being a dumbass or lazy or whatever else the Colts thought of Wentz. Ryan is a guy that you can trust. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say he's the second coming of Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck, but the guy did throw for nearly 4,000 yards last season with an all-time terrible roster. The guy can still play some ball, which brings me to the Atlanta Falcons and their offseason, because Atlanta has had a pretty horrific offseason. Their best receiver gets busted for betting on Falcons games.
Fail clown.
Atlanta. Fail clowns.
Clown.
This fail clown is out for the season. Another receiver left for Tampa Bay. Their leading tackler and pass rusher gone as well. Then they go all in trying to get the defendant of 22 lawsuits. And they whiff. They miss on that. And then they end up pissing on the face of their franchise in the process. And now they have to get rid of him too. And only then do they finally get around to hitting the reset button. And only then do they get around to finally admitting we are rebuilding. And in getting rid of him the way they did, they're taking a $40 million cap hit. If that sounds big, it's because it is big. It's the biggest cap hit in NFL history. More than $7 million more than the previous worst cap hit, which was, wait for it, Carson Wentz. They had the 4th pick in the draft last year, but instead of using it on a quarterback, they went with Kyle Pitts. I mean, don't get me wrong, really talented dude, but pretty tough to maximize a tight end if you do not have anybody who can throw it to him. So the Falcons had one of the all-time worst rosters last year, and it's going to be even worse this year. And yeah, I know. They brought in Marcus Mariota, and that he and Arthur Smith worked together in Tennessee. But what about that? Was that not the year that Mariota lost his starting job to Ryan Tannehill? So what's this about? A reunion in Atlanta because there's familiarity? But it wasn't like those were the good old days for Marcus, right? The Falcons winning 7 games last year was incredible. The Falcons winning 3 games this year will be a miracle. Back to Indy for a minute. I'm not saying it's a permanent fix. Far from it. But as far as Band-Aids go, I do like it. Wentz opened up a massive wound in that team. And Ryan's the kind of guy that if he can't close it, he can at least stop the bleeding. In the meantime, the fail clowns are bleeding out altogether. So this little game of musical chairs is about to stop. And the question is, where is Baker going to end up? Where does Baker sit down? Where does Jimmy G sit down? Then what? And you know what? Like I always say, I have not been giving myself enough credit lately because none of you do. So it's up to me to give myself credit. And I have not been giving myself enough credit lately. So credit to me. For real. Congrats to me for doing an entire take on Matt Ryan without mentioning a Super Bowl collapse. Not once. Credit to me for that. How you like me now? Tell me how my ass tastes. Nothing. Not once. Not a single mention of 28-3. Not a single reference to them having their foot on the Patriots' throat and then letting them get away. Nothing about being in the middle of the most stunning tank job in NFL history. Not one reference. Not one mention. Nothing. I'm waiting. Give me some credit. I got all day. All day. Let me hear it. Nope. We're not thinking about that guy. That's not what I think about. unlike all of you. No, when I think of Matt Ryan, the first thing I think of, and the last thing I think of, my memory, my thought of Matt Ryan starts and ends with him telling his teammates to get in their respective positions so they can proceed with the play.